My name is Kristian Dupont. I'm an old friend of this house. I'm not working here, but I have friends here, and every now and then I do some projects. So I'm very grateful that they would allow me to use these facilities to give this talk, and I'm very happy that you have all come here to listen to it. And I should actually say honestly that I'm a little bit nervous because I feel like it's a little bit presumptuous of me to talk about this. I would happily give a talk about immutable data structures or functional programming, but this is something where I feel like I'm not an expert. I'm a software developer at heart, and I've done leadership in various roles, both as a team lead and as a more or less CTO in small companies. So I do have experience with leading small teams of engineers. But otherwise, other than that, this is not something I really can claim to know much about. These are just some observations that I made, and I thought they were interesting. And so now you're the first people to hear this talk, and I hope that you will find it interesting as well. So so that's what this is about. When I say that this is about meme-driven retrospectives, you might be thinking of Scrum, because Scrum has one of the main rituals in Scrum is the retrospective. But this is not really specific to Scrum. You can use it in any kind of meeting where you are sort of, where the agenda is that you're sort of taking the helicopter perspective and looking at how are things in this group or team. And it's not even really specific to memes either. That's just what happens to be the driver of this. So what this really is about using humor as a tool for communicating in teams, and especially in teams of engineers. So that is what this is about. And if there are any boomers in here, I should quickly say that I'm Generation X, which it seems nobody cares about. It's always boomers versus millennials, or now maybe Generation Z. So I don't know if that makes me entitled to make fun of everybody or nobody. But in case somebody isn't aware of what a meme is, then you might be familiar with these images. So they appear on quite a lot of websites on the internet. And a meme is basically an image. I guess it can be a video as well, but typically an image, a photograph or a cartoon that depicts some emotion, some state that we all know and recognize. And the idea is then that these are raw images, but people put captions on them. They put text on them that describe their specific situation. So the funny thing becomes about, yeah, I totally recognize this little girl who looks like she's quite happy about the house being on fire. That is somebody who's maybe a bit devious, and we can all recognize it. If we use that image and put our own text on it, we can use that to describe some sort of situation that people can maybe relate to. So that is what I mean when I talk about memes. I'm sure there are other formats, and these are just some of the most common ones, but there are thousands of them, and they're being replaced on the internet all the time. I think they're quite an interesting phenomenon because from a sort of anthropological perspective, they don't really belong to the United States. They sort of belong to this international thing that is the internet. They're probably more Western. I don't know how much they use them in China, for instance, but to my knowledge, they're quite universal. So they don't really belong to any specific culture. And I just find that kind of interesting. It's sort of like the same way that the internet itself can be said to belong to the United States, and from some definition, it really doesn't. It really is an international thing, and so are these. They very much are a product of the internet. So anybody who's tried doing any sort of leadership will know that it's hard. And there are many, many books and talks and videos and everything on leadership. It's like an endless topic, and even an endless topic defining what it is. And I think Stephen Covey, the guy with the 7 habits, differentiates between management and leadership and all of that. And I don't really want to go into all of that. I just want to say that at least for software engineers, they are, at least until now, maybe AI is going to change everything. These days, who knows what will happen. But for until recently, at least, it has been the case that it's very much a seller's market. Software engineers are in very high demand and in too low supply. So if you need to build software and you need to find good developers, leadership is about finding and retaining talent. It is like figuring out where are the good software developers and getting a hold of them, and then just trying to keep them and enable them to do their work. Depending on whether you're sort of executive level or more of a middle management, it changes a little bit what your role in that situation is. But I think for at least middle management, I've heard the term shit umbrella, which I think is quite telling. It's like you are there to protect your team so that they can focus and actually do what they want. So given that they are actually talented people and they actually want to help the company or organization or whatever you're working with, then you need to just protect them so that they can be allowed to do what they want. And that is very hard. And it can be particularly hard to lead a team of engineers. It's changing a little bit. I would say since I started developing many years ago, 25 years ago, there's been a significant change in the culture. And I think as the tech startup world, all of that became cool, it has sort of started attracting a different demographics of people. So the developer is not necessarily the typical nerdy geek that eats pizza and is completely antisocial, that nobody can talk to, and who's a wizard at what he or she, mostly he, does, but not at any other sort of social interaction. I will say that I think there's still a bit of that going on, though. I feel like I still encounter engineers that are mostly comfortable just wearing their headphones. And I'm one myself, that's why I feel like I'm allowed to say it. I like to just put on my headphones and just be in my little world, not talking to anybody. That's my sweet spot. That's where I'm happy. And I know that a lot of engineers feel like that. So if you lead a team of salespeople, I'm sure it's different. I've never tried that, but I can imagine that they would be very quick to tell you if they're unhappy with their conditions or their colleagues or their salary or something like that. And that, I guess, can be a problem of a different kind. But with engineers, it can be a problem that they might not be telling you exactly how they feel. You sort of need to have a sense of it and be able to tell if they're happy or unhappy, at least for some of them. If you add to that, which is something that I've experienced many times during the past 10 years, that you're working with people from other countries, then you suddenly add to the equation cultural differences. So after Corona especially, it's been remote work for a lot of us, and I have personally been working with people from Poland, from Portugal, from New York, at one point from Australia and San Francisco. So a very spread out group of people, and they all speak English and things sort of work well, but there are cultural differences that can create some problems, and it may be difficult to realize exactly what those problems are, and it can be very hard to figure out what you can do about them. So that can lead you to this. This is Hide the Pain Herald, and I can assure you, if you try out this technique, you will get very familiar with him. This is a guy who's trying to hide the pain, and you can type whatever you want on top of him. So what is it that developers want? In my experience, they want to be in flow. So if you're familiar with Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, I think his name is, wrote this book about flow, which is basically about the state, the emotional state that you get into when you are working and everything is just going your way. Everything is just perfect for you. So you're experiencing the right amount of challenges and the right amount of being able to handle those challenges. So if something is too challenging, it can be frustrating. And if it's too easy, then it's not interesting. But if you're right at the sweet spot where things are the perfect amount of challenging, that's where you can experience flow. And when you do that, time and space disappears. You forget where you are and you realize suddenly that it's 10 o'clock at night and you've just been working and it's just been enjoyable. That is this is the primary reason why I still like developing after all of these years where maybe it would have been a better career choice to do more management or something. I still find that the act of programming is just very satisfying. And I think most developers will agree that that is just a unique experience that is very, very nice to experience. They also do want to feel like they're making a difference. I've experienced a number of times working on some product or some piece of code that was either about to be launched in 6 months, or maybe it was in production for whatever definition of that, but nobody was using it. And though I was happy that I was making my salary and I was doing what I loved, programming is still enjoyable. There is something that is just not quite as satisfying. If you're not producing something for real people and you're getting feedback, even if it's people who are frustrated, but just knowing that somebody's using this, they're relying on this, and when it doesn't work, it's annoying for them. That is it just makes it feel more meaningful. And I think many people need that, and maybe they may not be able to articulate it, and maybe they won't tell you, but if they are not experiencing this, they might be frustrated. One thing that I want to stress here is that good developers will almost without exception want to remove technical debt rather than create new features or whatever else business demands there may be. And that is one thing that makes it, it's not just about giving developers space, because even the very best developers, if they are just allowed to do whatever they want, they are going to want to polish the code base forever and clean out all the problems that they can see with it. And that is not always a good business strategy. So there is that to take into account. But aside from that, it's really about making sure that developers are happy. If they are frustrated, they will produce very little value. A happy developer will almost, with the exception of the technical debt stuff, I would say that a happy developer is likely to produce business value. But a frustrated one can not just produce very little, but it can potentially be detracting value. So that's one thing that I think it's very commonly known, but making software is not similar to building a house or something. You don't have just a bunch of people working on it, and even the person that is working very slowly is just working slowly, but you're still making progress. If there's a developer that's doing bad work, they may be breaking things and creating problems. If you have someone who creates the wrong abstraction in some important piece of code, that can create much more problems for you in the long run than somebody who does it the right way. Or otherwise, they might just leave you, and maybe they won't tell you until it's too late, because they are these introverted types that may not tell you how they actually feel. Anybody who hasn't read this essay should do it. Anybody who works with any type of maker, developer or otherwise. This is the essay that I've shared the most, I think, throughout my career. And it's one of Paul Graham's. He's written many good that I recommend, but this one in particular. So it's about how the schedule of a maker, in this case a developer, is different from that of a manager. So a manager will have a calendar that has lots of meetings in it. So the act of putting in another meeting is just a matter of whether or not there's a free slot in the calendar. In addition to that, it's almost free. So like taking lunch with someone is a no-brainer. You might as well, maybe something good will come out of it. Taking another meeting is almost free, as long as you have the time for it. Whereas for a developer, that is a completely different scenario. So if you're a developer who has a whole day free and you just have one meeting in the middle of it, that can break your sort of mental state for the entire day. So it's hugely expensive to just break up a developer's day just even with one meeting. So avoid it if you can. Try and have days or at least clusters where you take meetings and not have them here and there spotted out over the week, because that is quite expensive. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that in because I really think that that's a good essay and it's quite related to this. Sorry, do you want to ask something? Or no, okay. Right. So what feels like half a century ago, I guess it's not even half a decade ago, I was working at this Danish company that you may know called Karno, that makes these legal texts and has been doing so for many, many years. And I was not a lead here. I was working as a developer. There were these two girls, Shame and Stephanie. And Shame is Generation Z, I think. She must be. I hope I'm not insulting anyone here, but I think she must be that. And she goes on TikTok a lot. At least she did. And TikTok, I don't know anything about TikTok, but I know that she creates lots of memes on TikTok. And this was something she talked about quite often, so I did know about it. We all did. She showed us quite a lot of them, and they were fun. She was a very fun girl. And then there was this other girl, Stephanie, who was our team lead or manager on this team, and she said, I think it was mostly just for fun one day when we were doing our retrospective, okay, now break everybody. Everybody's going to go and take 2 minutes and create a meme that describes how this sprint went. And so everybody on the team went to this meme generator online. There are many of them. You can find anyone. I'll show you an example in a bit. But we all went online to one of those and had to generate a meme that would describe how we felt this sprint had gone. And it was a good laugh. Everybody had fun with it. And I also thought that there was quite an interesting way of communicating. It worked quite well. We tried many different things for retrospectives. And I'm sure if you have any retrospectives, you've tried different strategies. So one very common is to have like this board, sort of a board with Post-its where everybody puts in what went well, what can we do better, and what are the actions we're going to do for the next one. And then we had some different versions where we had to play little games, and everybody had to come up with at least 3 things that were funny about what happened, and so on. So it's doing retrospectives is just a way of evaluating how did this sprint go, and also how is our team feeling. It's like a very sort of soft kind of meeting, and it can be very useful, I think, for that purpose. So we did that, and it worked well, and we actually kept doing that for quite a few months until I stopped there. So maybe they're still doing it to this day. I don't know. It struck me that it worked quite well, but it didn't really. I didn't really think much more of it. And then in the company I was working at after that, we had this guy who was a very talented developer. And he was a very sweet guy. He was helping everybody because everybody was very happy with him because he knew all about our system, and he was very, very good. And so whenever anybody had a question for him, he would answer it. And then at one point in our Slack channel, he posted this comic. And I've sort of butchered it a little bit, but it goes from top to bottom here, and then this way and this way. And if I should just quickly explain it, it's this is a guy looking at a bit of code, and so he's thinking, okay, this is what the code looks like. So if the current, he's thinking about what this means, and you can see here he's become this small because he's now thinking of the whole system. And at this point, he's this small, thinking about what are the implications of this piece of code, and now he's this tiny because he's thinking about the entire system and all of the various implications. And this is why AI hasn't completely taken over our jobs yet as developers, right? Because one thing is writing the lines of code, that's sort of the craft part of it, but what developing is really about is considering this whole system. What if I change one thing here, what are the implications, not just for the rest of the system, but for the future of development for the system? Like, what will this mean? And then this guy who happens to be wearing a tie, so one could imagine he's in management, come and says, oh, I sent you that email about a thing, and it go poof, and then he's looking, oh, and there we go, back to start. The point of this comic is, I think he was telling me, or he was, obviously, he made a joke about it, but he was telling me and us that it was frustrating when people come in and ask him something. And it was a bit of an epiphany to me. He was using this humorous way of communicating that he had a frustration. And I happened to, at the same time, I was reading this book. I was reading this book. I was reading it in English, but it's Sigmund Freud, Der Witz und seine Beziehung zum Unbewussten, I think. It's about the joke, the concept of jokes. I've long had this theory that relationships are, they need humor to thrive. And I'm personally divorced, so I'm certainly no one to give relationship advice. But I was thinking about this, and I was reading this book, and Freud talks about how a joke, he talks about the concept of displacement, how a joke takes anger or frustration or something and displaces it on something else. So it might be from the boss to the joke itself. And so it allows for you to release some tension in a sort of innocent and non-dangerous way. And at the same time, I heard one of my favorite stand-up comedians talking about stand-up comedy, and he said the quote that laughing is surrendering, which I thought was quite interesting as well. So I think that when you allow yourself to use humor, you can allow people to say things that they're otherwise a little bit uncomfortable saying. Maybe because they don't want to stir tension, or they don't want to attract attention to themselves, or because they're shy of conflict, or just because this is just a way of saying something that they may not even have realized that was frustrating to them. So that is what I think I concluded that makes this work so well. And so just to show you how it works, this is just a random one I found of Google that we use quite a lot. It works like this. You just go to this, then you choose one of these images, and there's like 1,000 of them. So some of them you will know. This is Success Kid. You can see he's very happy about something. So maybe you want to use this to express that you're very happy about something that happened this sprint. You then write into those two, and if you're done taking pictures, I'll show the next one. This is an example where I've filled in these text boxes and then the text go in here. So it's very, very simple to generate these, and you then click the generate meme button, and the image, you can copy it and paste it into Slack or whatever. And this is just the way we did it, that I've also done it later on, is just saying, well, everybody take 2 minutes and come up with a meme or two that describes it. And then sometimes it would turn into this avalanche. People would just keep them coming, and everybody would like die laughing. And it's quite, I don't want to say anything specific because these are people that work here in Copenhagen. I don't want to tell anything about this specific group of people, but sometimes some truths come out that are quite telling, and it's I feel it's been a very good communication tool. So I definitely feel like this is something that is worth trying out and keep exploring for me. There is one thing to be aware of though, and that's true for any group. any group of people will have people who have different personalities. That's a given, because we're all people, we're all very different, and that's just how things are. And when you add cultural differences into the mix, that becomes amplified by a factor of many. So it's one thing is that I would say this works well. The premise for this to work is that people mean well. So I'm assuming that you have nice people in your team. If you have bullies, and there are people who are just bullies that don't mean well, and then that may well create an uncomfortable atmosphere for people. Obviously, if somebody uses this to mock other people, that is not what the intention with this is. But cultural differences can mean that what is considered sweet or a show of affection to someone can be considered rude or inappropriate to someone else. And on the team that we started doing this with, there was we were a combination of some Danes, then a girl from China, and a guy from Poland. And I've been working with quite a few people from Eastern Europe previously also in my work. And one thing that I remember ending up deciding to Google a little bit was that there was definitely some cultural differences about how much we were smiling to each other and like how much we would laugh. And so this is just a random blog that I found on the topic. It's just, you can try and Google this yourself, but there's quite a difference in the amount, if you will, of smiling that takes place east of here compared to here, and definitely compared to the United States, for instance. And if my understanding is correct, mostly to a Russian, but also to other Eastern European countries, smiling to a stranger is inappropriate, and it can be considered downright creepy. So it is something people don't do as a courtesy to others, because they would consider it to be inappropriate. Whereas to an American, and to some degree to a Dane, smiling to strangers is just a sign of a courtesy. It's like you're being nice to them and you're showing them that you're a friendly person. So an American and a Russian talking to each other may both think they're being considerate and both think that the other person is being rude. And so what can we do about this? Well, I don't know. But there is these guys, Geert and Geert, or I don't know how to pronounce the names. I assume they're brothers, Hofstede, Dutch researchers that have studied cultural differences a lot. And they have a lot of writings on the topic. This book is quite good, but they also have this wonderful website where you can go and you can enter your own country and then any number of other countries. And then it will show you a chart like this. So they've come up with 6 dimensions that they measure a culture on. And those dimensions are these that you can see down here. So power distance, that is the sort of mental distance that there is between a person in power and one under power, if you will. So a teacher and a student, or a doctor and a patient, or a parent and a child, or a boss and an employee. So in Japan, for instance, there's a very high power distance. And so in Japanese culture, it's expected that if a boss tells something, the employee will do it almost without question. Whereas here in Denmark, we have an extremely low power distance, and it's expected that any employee can tell their boss that their new idea is stupid, and it will have no other consequences than that the boss will respect said opinion. Individualism is almost, you can almost tell that the United States scores higher than any other country on this, and that's favoring the individual over collectivism, which is like thinking, okay, the group is more important than the individual. Some cultures focus highly on the group and some on the individual. Denmark is quite individual as well, which may be a little bit of a surprise, but that you can probably figure out why, because some of the other scales are more specific to what's Danish. And masculinity, for instance, is a scale where Denmark is very low. all of the Scandinavian countries are very feminine in values. So that is very much about caring about well-being and for all of us as the group. But the masculine values is sort of like being able to assert yourself and being the best at things and all of those things. So a typical Scandinavian joke might be that the football game should be everybody wins and nobody keeps score or something like that. I'm, as I said, no expert on this, so I don't want to go too much into detail. I just find these very fascinating. Uncertainty avoidance is about how much people try to avoid things that they don't know about. So this is something where Denmark is very low. And surprising, or to me surprising, Poland scores very high on this. I don't know why that is, but this is about being willing to try new things, taking risks and doing things that you're not completely sure how are going to turn out and expecting that things will go well. I'm imagining that the Danish social system and welfare and health insurance system attributes to some of that feeling of, okay, we can take experiments because we're going to be saved by the net if things go completely wrong. But that's just a guess. I don't know if that is actually true. Long-term orientation is almost self-explanatory also. It's about how far into the future you think when you make plans. And a little bit to my surprise, China scores extremely highly on this. And I don't really know what that says, but I do find it interesting that that is the case. And all of the other three countries that I was dealing with here score quite a bit lower. And indulgence is the one that I've read the least about, but it's about, as I remember it, it's about how much you favor vacations and like quality of life versus making sure that you're financially safe and thinking about insurance and all things like that. So all the sort of sensible things to do. So when you go to this website, you can enter your own and which other country the people you are working with are from. And then you can compare your cultures. And I think anybody who works with anybody from a different country should try this, just because it's so much fun. It creates really interesting conversations, if nothing else. And also it's quite it will help you maybe realize, okay, if this person here is saying something that I consider to be rude or I consider to be rash or something, maybe it's a cultural difference and not actually a personal difference. The thing is that it is very, very hard to realize what your own culture is. It's something that anybody struggles with, including those that have studied it a lot. We all think that what we're doing is normal, and then there's a bunch of other people doing further and further away, crazier and crazier things. The way they lead their lives, the way they plan, the way they do everything, it seems strange, but we're the normal ones. That's how everybody thinks, and it's really, really hard to get out of that. So this can help you keep in mind that, okay, there are these differences. And it doesn't mean that you should accept anything or that you should say, okay, we have people who don't smile on the team, so now nobody can smile. That's not, I don't think that's a good thing. It's just being aware that this may be causing a difference. And especially if you're trying this thing with the humor, it can be good to keep that in mind so that nobody gets offended or feeling sad. I found this video that extreme. So in many ways, Sweden is, if the Scandinavian countries are on the extreme and on some of these scales, Sweden is probably at the extreme of the Scandinavian countries. So in many ways, Sweden is the most Scandinavian, so to speak, in good and bad. And I found this video that I thought was quite fun that maybe some of you have seen. Let's see if I can get it to play.
It doesn't matter who you are, the same rules apply to everyone.
We have three main concerns to discuss with you.
Someone forgot to put this coffee cup in the dishwasher. Oh, it says Fredrik on it. Maybe it's yours, Fredrik.
But the dishwasher was full.
So you empty it. Your mother doesn't work here, Mr. Prime Minister.
Okay, you have to excuse me. I must attend to this.
Third time this week. What if Angela Merkel comes and then there are no fresh coffee cups?
تشتكي لسر دايك خبط.
Yeah. So that's an example of very low power distance. Anybody can tell the prime minister to put his coffee cup in the dishwasher. One thing that I think needs to be addressed also, and I have another video for this that I personally find quite hilarious. Let's see if I can get that to play just.
Bojack, do you want to talk about the elephant in the room?
Wow. Okay. You know what? You know what? Here's, first of all, wow. All right. I can't even. You know what? Wow.
He is never going to forget that.
Right, yeah. Talk about the elephant in the room. So it's, if you enjoy BoJack Horseman like I do, then that is hilariously funny. But the elephant in the room is the topic of politics. And I've avoided it, and for the purpose of this talk, I have no political opinions. The reason is that it's such a toxic and polarizing topic these days. Maybe it always was, but it feels like it's getting worse to me. And these humorous things are maybe posing a bit of a risk that you enter political territory. And I don't know if you've seen, but Basecamp and Coinbase at least made these official strategies that there can be no discussion of politics in the office, and it blew up in their heads. There was like a big scandal about it, and you can decide whether or not there should be any discussion of politics or not in the office. Like, I have no opinion on that. I just want to say that this is something you need to be aware of, and or at least I would keep in mind, because it is something that is likely to come up, and it's not clear to me what the right solution is. It's very difficult to deal with, but yeah, that is something you can maybe keep in mind. So the last slide here is this image I found of all the memes and where they are today. So all these people are alive and well, and that's quite fun to see. So yeah, that was it. So if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer, and otherwise maybe we can have a discussion if you're interested. Yeah?
I was just wondering, do you have an example of a meme you used in your own?
Not one that I've used, no. So, but
it just explains the.
Yeah. So this would be like this would be an example of one. So if the team is almost about to reach 80% test coverage, and then some manager comes in and say, "We need blockchain in our thing," that he takes away the fun balloon from everybody. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I should have brought more examples. The problem is that I don't want to bring in real examples from that show problems in various teams, so that makes this a little bit abstract. But yeah.
We need to make our own.
Yeah, yeah.
And for how long could you have such a retro with these memes? Could that be for like an hour or?
We did it as a part of the retro, so it wasn't the whole thing. It was just, and every now and then it would spawn a great discussion, and every now and then it would just not be interesting, and I think that's just because sometimes things just go quite well, and there really isn't that much to discuss, or it's the same as you discussed last time, and there's no new interesting things to bring up, but sometimes, especially sometimes when a decision had been made that somebody turned out to be quite frustrated with, if they really nail it, if they create a meme that sort of says, "Oh, you wanted to do this all along, and then you did this instead," and people laugh at it. It's quite a fun experience, and it's quite. It really did feel like it would lift up the team in a way that I think was quite unique. So yeah, it's a little bit of a team building activity.
So what makes sense to do before or after these memes?
Talk about if something comes up, if you realize, okay, we're actually quite annoyed that they wanted to introduce blockchain right away because we were almost reaching 80% test coverage. We're using this meme now. then that is maybe a good thing to have a real conversation about. So, or maybe it's just like, well, we all knew that we were frustrated about this, and now we were just allowed to vent. Like we just, everybody knew that this was annoying, or everybody knew that something was great, and we still just wanted to say it because we're so happy about it. And that can be satisfying as well to sort of say that. And the great thing about these is that if they're really good, they will get shared on Slack, and so they might bubble up and out to other places if they actually say something that's quite funny and telling. So yeah. Yeah.
I really found very interesting and important these cultural differences.
Yeah.
And not only that, but also if you are gonna be doing this, the team needs to have that kind of what is the psychological safety, that concept that they feel that they can do it.
Sure.
Because I struggle a little bit now to think how I can do this with my team in India.
Okay.
Where, where practically they don't want to. First of all, they don't. When we do meetings in Teams, the camera is not on; it's off. So
Okay.
That's the
Is that a rule they have, or is it because no? Okay.
It's because there's the cultural thing that they have.
I see. Yes. Okay.
I maybe it's my developers, I don't know. But not only that, even if I have been trying to do this, what was right, what is wrong, or
Yeah.
and it's difficult to make them talk. So to have some humor with them.
Yeah.
I'm interested to test.
To try it out. Maybe it will work. I mean, even like India is a huge country, so there's many different cultures within the country. But yeah, it's like try it out and see. Maybe they're the kinds that where this would work. And
I do believe that these cultural differences, that's extremely interesting. Because then I can understand a little bit more.
yes, well, definitely go to the Hofstede website and try this out. I recommend that to anyone. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. There's probably they might be used to higher power distance than here, and so it's expected. Yeah. So they're expected to do what the boss wants, and so they will want to tend to try and figure out what that is, even if the boss says, "I want you to criticize me" or whatever. They're going, "Yep, that's not."
That's the thing that I'm on Spanish, working in a Danish company where it's a flat
Right.
hierarchy, right?
Yes.
And you have these people from India that is the class.
So you're facing quite a challenge. Yes. Yeah.
And also, of course, I have people from Poland. That's another.
Yes.
People
Yeah. No, it's always a challenge. I have a very dear friend from Ireland that I'd been hanging out with for a couple of years, and then at one point I was living in London, and I was meeting him, and he was introducing me to some friends of his, and he said, "This is Kristian. He's a bit of a cunt." And I knew, I was so proud because I knew that this was like the ultimate show of affection for him. He was very Irish. Obviously, that is not something anybody would say. In some countries, that would be extremely rude. But I know that to him, that means that he trusted me. Like that was a real sign of affection. So I was very proud of it. But yeah, it's. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll stop here, and then I'll turn this off. So, yeah. Thank you.